If you're thinking about buying or renting, you may want to check out this video first. What's up, everyone? Thank you for stopping by the Achieve Financial Coaching channel, where we believe in breaking the chains of debt and talking about all things related to personal finance. Today, we are talking about whether or not you should rent or buy. It's a very personal decision, but today I want to propose 4 questions and do a quick cost comparison so that you can decide which one works for you. Please consider subscribing to the channel and checking out some of my other videos as well. Let's get started. Okay, my overall thoughts, there are 4 things to consider before you decide whether renting or buying is best for you. The first thing you should do is consider the overall cost to rent or own based on the area you live in. So some areas, like the cost of buying a home is just so outrageous, renting may be the only option that you have. And so you need to consider that. The second thing is, how long will you be in the area? If you're not going to be in an area for 5 years or more, it's really not worth buying a house, because startup costs and what it takes to get into a house can actually take a few years to recoup. And you want to be in the house long enough to recoup those costs and start building equity. And so you may just want to rent if you're not going to be in an area for 5 years or longer. The third thing you want to do is consider, do you have a lot of consumer debt? If you do, this may influence whether you actually can rent or own. So if you have a lot of consumer debt, credit card bills, other little things, like before you rent or own, you just want to make sure you go ahead and pay those things down and get them out of the way so you're sort of free from that as you move forward. The last thing you need to ask yourself, and be 100% honest with yourself, you know your style, you know your personality. Are you willing to personally commit to owning if you want to own? Are you going to paint this house or this condo every few years? Are you going to keep the yard maintained? And are you even going to obey the HOA rules? So you really have to assess whether or not you're the type of person that is actually going to obey the rules. You're going to make sure you're keeping the house up to date so your neighbors aren't mad at you when you park your car all on your grass. Now, whether you want to rent or buy, you need to be able to cover the upfront expenses of acquiring the property or moving in, putting enough furniture in it so that it's livable, and you still need to maintain a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. I need to call that out. If you're going to be broke after you move in, you may as well stay put and stay in your situation now. So renting or buying, after you're all in and you're settled, you still need to have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So when we look at comparing renting versus buying, overall, there are pros and cons for each. And so I just wanted to start off at a high level in this comparison and show you some pros and some cons for both. So a pro for buying would be the potential to build wealth through real estate, of course, and then stability. Putting down roots and having stability is good for a community. The less transient the community, the better. When it comes to renting, some of the pros are low cost of ownership. You don't have to maintain as much. And then you have the flexibility to move easier and more often than if you owned. So overall, there's some things that are not so great about owning or renting. So when it comes to buying, there's high maintenance and hidden costs. So some things that pop up when you own a home are things you may not be able to predict. And then there is always a chance that you have a hard time selling or getting rid of the property. When you're talking about renting, rents increase every time you have a lease, right? You renew your lease and your rent goes up. And also, you don't build equity, of course. You're just paying rent, and you can't do any modifications to the property. Some properties don't even let you hang pictures on the walls or put holes in the wall to mount photos. So as you can see, overall, there are pros and cons to both owning and renting. Now let's do a quick cost comparison. Let's assume we are renting or buying spaces of similar sizes in an area with an average cost of living. And we'll break the cost down into 3 categories: upfront cost, ongoing cost, and closeout costs. So let's start with the upfront costs. When you are buying, you have inspection fees, earnest money you have to put down that does eventually go towards closing costs, but you have appraisal fees, closing costs, a down payment, and you have moving costs. When you're talking about renting, you have application fees, your first and last month's rent, and a deposit. You also have moving costs. The ongoing cost for buying is a mortgage payment. This is a pretty long list. Homeowners insurance, property taxes, PMI, and that's private mortgage insurance. So if you don't put 20% down on a house, you have to pay private mortgage insurance to protect that lender. This goes away after your balance reaches 80% of your original purchase price. Also, one thing to think about, people think mortgages don't go up, but they can if your taxes and insurance are escrowed inside of your mortgage payment. And let's say the property is increasing big time, and so your taxes go up, and you may also need to increase the amount of insurance you have. So it's not true that mortgage payments can't go up. They can adjust slightly, up or down, actually. So then to continue with what you have to deal with ongoing costs as a homeowner, you have your gas or electric. Many homes have both. Your trash, your alarm monitoring, lawn care. Can't forget about that furnace or AC. I've had recent experiences with that. Also, your time. People don't think about it, but all that time you spend fixing things yourself, doing it yourself, that counts as well. Pest control, appliance repairs, and anything else that breaks. According to a 2018 Market Watch article, hidden costs can be as much as $9,300 per year on average. That's about $6,000 in sort of necessary costs, things like taxes and homeowners insurance and utilities, but another $3,000 in just basic maintenance. It can be even more depending on where you live. So when you look at renting with ongoing costs, you have your rent. You also, one thing to understand is on average, rent is actually higher than a mortgage on average, especially now with the mortgage rate so low. But rent also adjusts with each new lease. So you also have your renter's insurance. Renter's insurance is dirt cheap. So if you are renting, you need to get renter's insurance. And then you also have your utility bills like gas or electric. A lot of places don't have both. And also water is free in a lot of apartment complexes, at least where I live in the Atlanta metro area. So to wrap this comparison up, let's talk about closeout costs. You're now ready to move out of that apartment or that house you're renting or that house that you own. When you think about someone who owns, to get out of their home and move, you have closing costs, which could be as much as 10% of your final sales price when you add in all the fees. Any repairs based on a potential buyer's inspection, you have staging costs, and you have moving costs. When you look at the closing costs for someone who is renting, you have to repair, of course, any damage that you've done. And if you haven't done any, you may get your deposit back. And then you also have moving costs. Okay, now that we've proposed these questions that you need to ask yourself and we've done a little bit of a cost comparison, if your heart is really set on renting, if you're not renting now, maybe you're staying with someone, you have a roommate, you're staying with parents or whatever. If you're considering renting or if you're considering buying, I would do a very quick exercise. It's a 3-month exercise that I like to recommend. And what I would do is I would forecast what the expenses would be to rent or to buy, whichever one you're thinking about doing. And I would forecast those costs, and then I would actually pretend that I have those costs for 3 months. So I would take that money, if it was, just to use a round number, $1,000, I would take the $1,000, I would put it in an account and not access it. I would pretend it's not there, and I would do that for 3 months. At the end of 3 months, you ask yourself and be honest with yourself, how did that feel? Can you actually afford to rent? Can you actually afford to buy? If no, you may want to go back to the drawing board. You may want to save a little bit more or think about making some other moves. If yes, then move forward and take the money that you have been saving by doing this 3-month exercise and put it towards your moving expenses or your closing costs or your first and last month's rent if you're going to rent. Take your time with making a decision, especially when you are buying a property. Buying is the largest purchase we'll ever make, and you do not want to mess this up. So take your time, think through it, and don't rush into it. You can achieve much greater things than where you are today if you're willing to put in the work. Conceive it, believe it, and achieve it. I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to my channel and checking out some of my other videos as well. You can also follow me on Facebook at AchieveFC. Looking forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks for checking out the channel.